Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 156 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On Saturday, number 3 Clemson took down Virginia Tech 45-10 inside of Lane Stadium, securing the first losing regular season for Virginia Tech football since 1992. What are the main takeaways from the Clemson-Virginia Tech game? And we talk a little bit of Virginia Tech basketball against VMI from Thursday. All that and more coming up on episode 156 of the Tech Sideline Podcast that gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, so glad that you could join us as we record on Monday morning, December 7th. We have our managing editor, Chris Coleman, with us on the podcast set, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, behind the scenes, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. If you are watching live or archived on YouTube, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It's great to have you with us. And if you have a question for Will or Chris, basketball or football related, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I will get to those at the end of the show. Campus Emporium is proud to sponsor the TSL community. A portion of every sale is returned to Virginia Tech in support of its Endowment for Excellence, student programming, and need-based scholarships. Campus Emporium has been serving the Virginia Tech community for over 25 years from their locations in Blacksburg and their online store. Please visit the #1 source for Virginia Tech merchandise at campusemporium.com or go see them at 207 North Main Street or 1337 South Main Street. Tech Sideline Podcast also presented by Southeast Regional Training Center. Go to southeastrtc.com to find out how you can support Virginia Tech wrestling. Gentlemen, good morning. It's a little chilly outside because it is a winter wonderland in Blacksburg. First snow of the year is here.
Yes, and I'm looking out the window, and it's sticking to the trees. It didn't really stick to the cars or the roads, though, so that's good.
I love the first snow, Chris. Driving in, it's a very pretty view coming into the Corporate Research Center.
It is. It's very picturesque. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those winters where it's actually going to be pretty warm, but when it does snow, it's really, really, really going to snow.
I don't remember last winter. What happened last winter?
I don't remember either.
I don't really think it snowed that much
I don't think it did either.
I know that last summer it didn't rain for like the last 2 months of the summer, and so that extended on into winter is what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, looking forward to a great show today. We're going to analyze the entire Clemson-Virginia Tech game. We're going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about some parts that maybe Virginia Tech would like to have back. Plus, there was a basketball game on Thursday night, and it was competitive between Virginia Tech and VMI. We'll talk a little bit about Hokie Hoops towards the end of the show. They've got a big game against Penn State on Tuesday in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. But I want to lead off the podcast with this. You know, I was listening to ESPN Blacksburg on Saturday. They do a pregame show before the coverage of Virginia Tech and Clemson.
So who does that show? Who hosts
That's Paul Van Wagner, Andrew Alex, and a couple of other people go on as well. But there was a question that was asked on that show, and I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to get both of your takes on this. When was the last time Virginia Tech was an underdog in a game that the fan base was not thrilled about watching?
Woof. Well, so David Hale, and I think we talked about this in the last podcast, David Hale said the last time, what was the spread on this game, Chris? 20-something?
Yeah,
22 or something like that. David Hale said the last time Tech was a 20-plus dog was against Alabama to open the 2013 season. But Tech fans were engaged and excited about that one.
I remember not really looking forward to the game so much, but at least it was the first game of the season. Remember, Tech had brought in changed offensive staffs in the offseason. Yeah. So it was like the first game for Scott Loeffler, Grimes, Aaron Moorhead, that whole new offensive staff that had come in. So I wasn't really looking forward to the game per se, but I was looking forward to the season.
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of? This whole pregame vibe is that I don't remember what year it was, but there was a year where Miami was very highly ranked. I think they were number 1, and they came to visit Lane Stadium. You're talking early 1990s, probably, I don't know, 1992 or something like that. I don't think it was that year, maybe 90 or 91. But Miami rolled in here. They were number 1, and everybody knew Tech had no chance to win. And Miami got up, I don't know, like 35-0 or something like that. The final score wound up being 45-23 because Miami put all the scrubs in and Tech, scored some points late. And that was actually like the second most points given up by Miami all season long that Virginia Tech scored that day. So the final score looks kind of acceptable, but that's going way back. You're talking almost 30 years back where you felt like Virginia Tech was so overmatched they didn't have a chance.
And this game is kind of the opposite of that. In this game, the final score doesn't look respectable, but Tech actually hung in there for the better part of 3 quarters.
This was a 1-score game with 20 minutes left.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and break it down. Number 3, Clemson beats Virginia Tech 45-10 on Saturday. The Hokies had 3 different quarterbacks play in the game: Hendon Hooker, Braxton Bermeister, and Knox Kadum. Will, before we get into the specifics of this game, general thoughts on the game, a game in which Virginia Tech, like you said, was only down 7 at halftime. What were your thoughts on the game plan, and what were your thoughts on the game overall?
I'll answer this way. I got started on my Monday article last night, and I've already written like 5 pages. Chris will back me up on this. There are some games where you just really don't really know what to write, and you don't feel like writing anything. And I think Chris felt that way about this one.
Yeah, it's the first time I felt this way in a long time. Just coming up with a different way to say the same thing every single week is very, very difficult.
So I had the opposite situation where I had 3 or 4 topics I wanted to talk about, and so I got off to a running start with it last night. And so if you ask me for my general thoughts on the game, I thought that Virginia Tech's game plan was very good, very sound. Shorten the game by running the clock down on offense, and the way that Virginia Tech ran their offense, So I go on at length about this in my article. Clemson's known for stealing signs. They steal your offensive calls, and they have a whole system where Brent Venables is known. So I did a little research on this last night. Brent Venables is known for making adjustments late at the line of scrimmage in air quotes. What's actually going on there is Clemson's sign stealers are relaying to him what the opposing offense is going to do, and he's making his defensive call right before the ball is snapped. And I go into a lot of detail in my article that I won't go into here. And I haven't watched enough. I know that this is a thing. Sports Illustrated ran an article about it at the beginning of the season. Everybody's known that for years that Clemson's really good at stealing signs, and they're not the only program that does it. It is not against the rules. And in baseball, it's really frowned upon.
Baseball, there's a certain culture.
Right.
You just don't do that. Yeah.
And that's not really true in college football.
Right.
I think, but the conclusion of the Sports Illustrated article was that of all the programs that steal signs and adjust and things like that, Clemson's the best at it. That they have a phalanx of bots and drones and people that figure all this stuff out. So I haven't watched enough Clemson football to know what other teams do to combat that. Teams will change their signals up from week to week, but a good staff can figure it out by halftime. And so the Sports Illustrated article went into detail about games where the Clemson defense had struggled in the first half and then come out and played lockdown in the second half. And the conclusion was that they'd gotten their sign stealing down for that particular game. So I don't know what other teams have done to adjust, but I know that what Virginia Tech did was they stayed in the huddle a long time till it got late in the play clock. Then they quickly went to the line. They would maybe put a couple guys in motion very quickly and run the play within 5 or 10 seconds. So you're not really giving Clemson enough time to figure out what you're doing. And if you go back and watch the film, there's not a lot of adjusting going on the Clemson defense before the snap. The other thing that Tech did was I wasn't able to observe if they were running a lot of receivers in and out with play calls, but there were a number of times where Burmeister went to the sideline and spoke directly with the play caller.
Yep.
So no hand signals that you can steal going on. I just thought Virginia Tech's game plan from that standpoint was outstanding. Keep the football away from Clemson, limit their ability to steal signs and anticipate what you're doing on offense. And so that's my first takeaways. I thought the game plan was great.
Yeah, to beat Clemson, you have to pretty much do everything perfectly. You have to get your preparation throughout the whole week, your game plan, how you want to approach it. That has to be perfect, and then you have to execute it almost perfectly during the game. So Tech's preparation was pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
But then they got out in the game, and they had too many turnovers.
And Fuente also said after the game, he pulled Hooker after, I guess, one series and put Burmeister in. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the plan. And the plan wasn't to leave Burmeister in, but they did because he was doing so well. Now, Fuente did make a comment when he was talking to Mike Burnip about how Hooker in the first possession was breaking the huddle early. He basically wasn't doing what they'd been practicing all week.
Right.
And I kind of, when I rewatched the game, I forgot to look for that. But I did notice that Virginia Tech's very first snap from scrimmage, there were still 25 seconds on the play clock or something like that.
I'd heard before the game that Burmeister was going to play. Mm-hmm. I don't think they planned to play him that early. And Fuente said they didn't plan to leave him in, but he just started, playing well. But the original reason they took Hooker out is because the very first play of the game, he went out there and did the opposite of what they had practiced all week. So, you can bridge this into the Hooker question if you want. But, there was something off about him mentally this past week. And then we saw the breakdown on the sideline. So, I don't know what's going on there. I hope he's okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead and transition to that. We'll talk about the game in full. I do want to get back to talking about
So first of all, let's talk about the fact that the podcast is at 10:30 today instead of 10. We should probably actually do that every Monday because the Fuente's press session starts at 11:30. So the reason we're doing the 10:30 podcast today is we want to get about an hour in, and then I Twitter and see if there's any news or anything coming out. And we should probably actually have been doing that all along. But particularly with the Hooker situation, I know what Fuente said Saturday. I want to hear what he says today to open his comments. So that's why we're running a little later. We want to incorporate that into the podcast.
So again, we'll get back to talk about Braxton Bermeister. I want to talk about the first half, the offense, but I think that was, as soon as the game was over, I think the fan base was concerned about Hendon Hooker and making sure he was okay. And after the game, Coach Fuente said that he was told during the game that he was having trouble getting warm, that he was cold on the sideline. And there was a shot from ESPN of him on the sideline where you could tell that something was off. So he did not return to the game itself. That's when Knox Kadum came in because Braxton Bermeister got hurt. Mike Niziolek did a story in the Roanoke Times over the weekend in which he interviewed Alan Hooker, who's Hendon's dad, and a couple of quotes that stood out that were good. Talking to him today, we feel confident he's fully recovered. He's fine. He'll be ready to go. Hendon is resilient. Everything that you wanted to hear him say, he basically said in terms of him being okay, which is really great to hear. But, Will, basically what we're hearing, it was cold on the sideline. He had trouble getting warm, and the trainers took him off the field. What did you see, and what did you make of the post-game comments from Coach Fuente regarding the status of Hooker?
So I was in the press box again. I've been in the press box all year, and it was actually a lousy place to watch this game. And I thought you got a lot more from the television coverage than we could see or whatever in the press box. If I could go back and do it over again from the time Hooker didn't go back in, so let me paint a different picture. Hooker doesn't go back in. They send in Knox Kadum, and you don't even know why. And they have television monitors in the press box, and I happened to look up at it at the moment where they walked Hooker into the locker room. Now, fans watching on television had already seen him, for lack of a better term, convulsing on the sidelines, just kind of hitching, and you could tell something was off. Those of us in the press box hadn't seen that, and we never really did. If I could go back and do it over again, anybody who's working the press box worth his salt has a pair of binoculars. I got my binoculars with me because you always want to see who's injured, how bad does it look. Once a guy's taken to the sidelines, what are they doing with him? You know, I wasn't dialed in enough to know to watch Hooker. So my impressions come from looking at the film afterwards, looking at my DVR copy afterwards. And I've gotten to where I don't even remember the question you asked, but it's clearly this is not a medical opinion because we have nothing to go on, but we were talking about it before we went live with the podcast, and something just happened. You know, he fumbled. There were no indications that anything was wrong until he fumbled the one that was returned for a touchdown that made it 31-10, I believe. Right. Yeah. Now Hooker gets up off the ground and chases the guy returning the fumble. And it's right after that you can see him having issues on the sideline. And the official, not the official, but the information we got yesterday said anxiety combined with being cold. I just think he had some sort of reaction that you can't really describe, and maybe not even medically. That's my take. Maybe we'll find out more at 11:30, a little bit later in the podcast.
Yeah. I think there have been – I don't think you can write it off as just the cold. I mean, he sat on the sideline dressed out for the Notre Dame game last year, which was much, much colder than this game. He went through the Pitt game last year, which was freezing cold and raining the whole time. So it wasn't just cold. I think it was some kind of mental reaction to
combined with
the
reaction.
Cold, right, and create some kind of maybe chemical reaction within you. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I think that was more than just the cold, and more than just. I think it may be anxiety combined with the cold.
And so let's be clear about this. Having watched it on television, he wasn't faking it. Whatever was going on there, he wasn't making it up. And I think most people that watch are like, yeah, that whatever that was, that's real. And the other thing is he's not usually an anxious guy. He doesn't give off that impression anyway.
No, he certainly doesn't.
He's always been cool and collected in games.
Another quote from his dad in the Roanoke Times article from Mike Niziolek. He said, he wasn't having a seizure or anything. It's a natural reaction to the cold. You just can't control it. It's not something you can fix with a coat or a heater.
Sometimes the cold gets into you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It would be interesting to... not that the camera was on him the whole game, but, when they took him out of the game, what was he wearing on the sideline when he wasn't playing? Did he immediately put a coat and gloves on or something? Because I think it's one of those things where if you're outdoors, you need to keep yourself warm the entire time. You can't just be like, oh, I'm cold, and then put on some gloves and then get warm in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a core temperature thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they say, if they really say anything. The guys who are the reporters who are on the call, Mike Barber and Niziolek and Bitter, they'll ask the questions.
Another part of the article, and then we can move on. Alan Hooker dismissed speculation the incident had anything to do with his health scare earlier in the year. Hendon was sidelined under the team's COVID-19 protocols and underwent additional testing before being cleared to return. So that's good news. And so, again, there felt like there was some good news from that article, though, that he seems to be doing
but
okay.
I don't think Alan Hooker's a doctor. So, we'll see.
Well, just hope that he's okay. That's the main thing. You never want to see someone hurt. And unfortunately for Virginia Tech, a couple of key injuries happened in this game against Clemson. Christian Darrisaw went down. We're getting some questions in the chat. Braxton Bermeister left the game. So let's go back. We just touched on the injury, but for a moment, before we talk about Burmeister getting injured, let's talk about Braxton Bermeister himself. You said that you had heard that he was going to play in the game on Saturday. He ends up through the air, 10 of 12, 127 yards, and led a touchdown drive early in that first half. What did you like about Burmeister, and did you feel he gave the offense a much-needed spark in that first half?
He certainly played well. He was certainly ready to play.
Passed it well.
Pat threw it well. I think, obviously, early in the season, he didn't pass it very well, but, this guy was a transfer who was on the scout team last year, all redshirting, then didn't have a spring practice. Brand new offense for me. Never been in the offense before at all, right? So it was understandable that, things just weren't operating, on 8 cylinders, so to speak, with him in there. at one point during the season, he broke like 3 of his toes and 1 of his feet when an offensive lineman stepped on his foot. Fuente said he kept practicing during all that, but, went back to third string. So I don't know. I mean, I thought he did well, and then he himself got hurt.
Yeah.
So what is the quarterback situation going into the UVA game now? Would he be able to play?
Quincy, wherefore art thou, Quincy?
Yeah, well, Quincy was in the stands the other night supporting the team.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
But it's Quincy. I mean, he can't play. His thumb is legitimately hurt.
Well, that's true.
So
That's
even
true.
if he was here, he wouldn't be able to play. So I don't know what is Hooker's situation. I don't know. It does honestly, like, if we had to play a game tomorrow, I would worry about putting him in the game. Because it might be cold this weekend. It's going to be a pressure-packed situation. And, I would need more information from doctors and things like that and from Hendon himself before I could make that decision. But, obviously your other option is Knox Kadum, who I thought did a credible job, considering, he's a fourth-string quarterback, or I guess he was
So let me ask you
third.
something. Do you remember his high school film?
Yeah, I don't think he threw an interception as a senior in
Do
high
you think
school.
his arm looked stronger the other night than it did in his high school film?
I would say so.
I thought he was a pretty accurate passer in his high school film, but not a lot of arm strength.
Correct.
Kadum-
But I mean, you would expect that. I mean, now after just a year to get a little bit bigger and everything like that, it should be a little stronger.
Kadum came in that third quarter. He finished 4 of 6, 68 yards, and that screen pass that he got crushed on that and was still able to.
That was a really nice play.
He hung in there, and those screen passes, the timing has to be perfect. And if you throw it early, you're just not going to complete it, and sometimes
And if you throw it late, it's going to get picked off.
So sometimes you've just got to put your body on the line and take that hit, for the good of the team, and he did that.
I want to go to a pivotal moment in this game, and that was towards the end of the first half before halftime. Hokies were down 17-10. Virginia Tech had all 3 of its timeouts, ran a couple of running plays, and then Khalil Herbert breaks off a big run, gets to midfield, Hail Mary attempt. Raheem Blackshear catches it. Not even on the one. How about the half-yard line? He was inches away from essentially tying the game at halftime. But, the fan base, was very passionate afterwards about how that final minute went down. Chris, did you feel like, and Coach Fuente alluded to after the game, he felt like the way Clemson was playing offensively, that they had 3 timeouts. He didn't want to give the ball back to him. Mm-hmm. What did you make about how the final minute of the first half transpired?
Yeah, I understand those sentiments. I also understand that maybe when the odds are long against you to a certain extent, that there are a few times where you maybe need to take a couple of risks here or there to have a chance to win. Because it's not like the game was tied at that point. Tech was behind. So Tech was, even if, let's say Clemson didn't score the rest of the game, which wasn't going to happen, of course, but Tech would have still needed to score one more touchdown just to force overtime, right? So you've got to get that touchdown at some point. So I don't know. Will has more details on the thought press.
The whole sequence.
I guess so. Go ahead, Will.
So the ball was kicked off with, I think, 1:06 left. Herbert returned it to the Tech 32. 55 seconds to go. You're at your own 32 and 3 timeouts. And I look at that as opportunity.
It's not like you're on your 22.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, we're okay. We're not backed up to our 15 or our 20. And we have all 3 timeouts. 55 seconds. This is an opportunity to go down and score it, to at least get close enough for a field goal. Brian Johnson had already made a 54-yarder. So, he was feeling it. And I believe it was in the same direction. Wind at his back. I'm not thinking about the next thing about, oh gosh, if we don't succeed here, Clemson might score. I do. So let me boil it down simpler. That situation to me is an opportunity, not a cause for concern. Fuente approached it as a cause for concern. Oh, if I do the wrong thing here, things could actually get worse. No, I never go there mentally. I'm like, hey man, we got a chance here. And so they run a play, and Herbert gains 4 yards out to the 36, and I looked at the film. He hit the ground with 50 seconds left to go. And Tech just let the clock run. And they ran another running play with 9 seconds left to go and 3 seconds on the play clock. So they burned off the entire clock. So 9 seconds left to go, and that's when Herbert runs 21 yards and gets tackled at the Clemson 43, I believe, if I'm doing my math correctly and remembering things correctly. He gets knocked out of bounds at the 43 with 2 seconds left. How about you do it this way? You pick up 4 yards on first down. He gets tackled with 50 seconds left to go. You call for a timeout. Maybe you get it with 47 seconds left to go. You get that same run, and he gets knocked out of bounds with 40 seconds left to go. You're now at Clemson's 43-yard line with 40 seconds left to go and 2 timeouts, and now you're in business. But because they ran the clock completely down, all they could do was throw a Hail Mary. And so, I don't want to storm the gate with a pitchfork and a torch, but that's just the way I look at it. I would have been more aggressive and would have tried to conserve clock and tried to score. I just completely disagree with the way Fuente pictured it in his mind.
We know Tech has some creative passing plays in their arsenal. I call it the smoke and mirror offense, of course, and they're almost trick plays to a certain extent. And the thing about trick plays is if you run them too much, they're no longer trick plays, right? They become expected. It's just a part of the game. That said, there would have seemed the opportune moment to break one of those out.
I think you'd have to ask a football coach, but to your point, I think coaches go into games with 1 or 2 plays in their back pocket that they've never run before, trick plays that they're going to run when they feel the time is right. So that's the other thing I left out was that was a prime opportunity to maybe go out to the line of scrimmage a little early and show Brent Venables something to where he thinks you're going to do a certain thing and then do something completely different.
Yeah.
I just think it was opportunity missed. So the other layer to this is it's not like this crushed the team and turned the game completely around.
Right.
Virginia Tech was very competitive for another 10 minutes of game time. When Devon Diablo picks off that pass in the end zone, it's 17-10, and Tech's got the ball and they're in business. Unfortunately, Bermeister fumbles, and as the clock goes under 5 minutes in the third quarter, Trevor Lawrence scores a touchdown that makes it 24-10. So let's be clear, it's not like it destroyed the morale of the team.
No, absolutely not.
But I just
Well, it was kind of like the Ohio State game in 2015. Remember that the final score ended up being a blowout, but with late in the third quarter, it was like a 1-score game pretty much.
Until Brewer got hurt.
Yeah.
And not to mention, too, when you've got the ball with under a minute left, and they've got 3 timeouts, but Clemson also gets the ball to start the second half.
Correct. We're leaving that out. So that's another thing that probably went through Fuente's mind was, holy cow, if we don't do anything good here and they score, they might score again.
On 2 straight possessions.
Then they're down 31.
Right.
Whatever. Yeah. You know where I stand.
Looking at the third quarter quickly, I want to talk about the defense specifically in a minute, but really
So I left one thing out. I'm actually going to put in my article today a poll for the people, the subscribers that read the article. Do you agree or disagree with the way Fuente handled the end of the first half? So because I want to know. I see the arguments on Twitter and on our message boards. I want to know where the percentages lie. So sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, looking forward to it. Let's and you guys kind of touched on it. Third quarter, Tech had their chances, turned the ball over, and the game was essentially out of hand by the end of the third quarter. What I'd rather do is talk about the defense for a moment, because I left the Clemson game, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. I felt like even though 45 points were given up, Tech played better defensively against Clemson than they did Pittsburgh. I felt like it was a much...
No question.
What did you overall thoughts, before we get into specific players, the thoughts on Justin Hamilton's game plan going in and the way the defense played overall?
Well, the game plan worked, so we can't have many complaints there, can we?
Yeah.
So I think, all right, if you look at what at the end of the third quarter, I think Clemson had scored 31 points at the end of the third quarter, but one of them was on a 12-yard drive after the Bermeister fumble. One of those touchdowns was the 66-yard fumble return for a touchdown. So they basically, in 3 quarters of football, scored 17 points against the Virginia Tech defense. My only issue with the defense was really with like one play later in the game. It was that long touchdown pass that Clemson threw, and I thought the Tech defensive back should have laid out to make the tackle at the 5-yard line, and he just kind of held up and stopped. And I think at that point, Tech had just kind of they checked out mentally to a certain extent there. But that Clemson had 433 yards of offense, 50 yards came on one play by the running back. The Tech offense, although they didn't score many points, they helped the defense by keeping the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good game plan by Virginia Tech. It didn't work because you still the game plan can be great, but you still have to execute the game plan, right? And Tech, they just had too many turnovers and too many missed opportunities and things like that. When you're playing a team with the talent level of Clemson,
you almost have to play a perfect game.
You do.
Yeah.
I mean, well, there's no such thing as a perfect game, but you can't have those turnovers that Tech had. You can't have, when you've got the ball on Clemson's 28, you can't have your starting center with a late hit. I have a problem with that one. Like, late hits don't bother me. Like, I recognize that Brock Hoffman is a nasty physical guy who's going to play to the echo of the whistle. And it wouldn't bother me if he had if he had excessively blocked someone that he was already engaged with.
Right.
This was a situation where this guy was on the ground, and he just came in on top of him, and Fuente went after him on the sideline.
Gave him an earful.
It's a good thing Fuente was wearing a mask.
That would have been bad. So not safe television.
So you can't. That was in the second quarter. That was the opening first drive of the second quarter, and Tech had the ball on Clemson's 28, and I think they were down. I guess it
was 10-7 at that point.
It was either 10-7 or 14-10 Clemson. I don't remember when Clemson scored their. Yeah. Or maybe it was 10-7.
Yeah, because Clemson scored a touchdown.
That's right. That's right. You're right. But at any rate, the game's right there for you.
Yeah.
So you can't do things like that and beat Clemson. You have to avoid those critical errors, and Tech didn't do it.
So look at the numbers. Trevor Lawrence, 12 of 22, 195 yards, a touchdown, a pick. I mean,
that's by
Travis
far
Etienne,
a season low in passing for Clemson.
And Travis Etienne, the ACC's all-time leading rusher in conference history, 66 yards.
4.1 yards a carry.
Yeah,
I think his career he's over 7 yards per carry, and Tech held him to.
Yeah, his first 2 or 3 years, he was over 7 yards a carry. This year, he's at 5.4 coming in, and he got no explosive plays that I remember.
No.
In the passing game or the running game.
No, he did look good in the running game, though. What impresses me, and we talked about Thursday, I'm glad we did, about going back to Lawrence, about the running game. His ability on the RPOs, that one touchdown he had in the third quarter where he's holding onto that ball,
until he sucked Tisdale in, I think it was. So
long. By the way, I brought this out as we brought up Trevor Lawrence for the first time. Put it my Jets mask for those listening. But, yeah, I felt like he has the ability to go over 300 yards, 400 yards. And, he was held in check.
Yeah, if you told me before the game, if you give me his stats, 12 of 22 for 195, ATN 16 for 66, 4.1 yards per carry, and then their top receiver, 3 catches, 32 yards. If you had given me all those numbers before the game, I'd have been like, man, I will take that. We're going to be in this game.
Yeah, and so Lawrence has only thrown 3 interceptions all year. One of them was the one to Diablo. And he effectively has thrown 4. If Chapman had held on to the ball, Chapman caught the ball but did not hold on to it.
Right.
If you watch that replay, he had it, and then he hit the ground and it bounced out. I'm not saying the refs blew the call. I'm just saying that he actually did catch it. If he holds on to that, that's 2 interceptions in one game for Trevor Lawrence. He had done that since probably since the beginning of last year.
A couple of numbers for Virginia Tech defensively. Ashby and Tisdale lead the team in tackles with 7. Amari Barno, a tackle and a half for loss. And to me, Will, it feels like towards the end of the season, Barno quickly kind of establishing himself as one of the players, the best players on Virginia Tech's defense.
Yes, and he needs to, as we've talked about many times, buy in during the offseason. It has been pointed out to him. They finally got him to switch from linebacker to defensive end, and it should be pretty clear now that he can be a really good defensive end.
Yeah, get yourself up to 255, and you'll have a chance to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
If you stay at your current weight, you're just going to be another guy where everybody's going to say, man, he just didn't quite fulfill his potential. And that's all going to come down to the work he puts in the weight room and in nutrition. Also, eating the right foods, being disciplined as far as that goes in the offseason.
One stat I want to bring up, by the way, from Damian Salas, who's a frequent watcher of the show and webmaster at Virginia Tech. When Virginia Tech was leading, first time Clemson was trailing this season in a game that Trevor Lawrence had started.
How about that?
Interesting stat.
I also think part of the fact that things went well was I just didn't see Clemson as being fully fired up. I don't want to take anything away from Tech's game plan and Tech's effort, but I do think Clemson was kind of going through the motions a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's one of those things that's like, how do you tell whether a team lacks talent or if it's player development, right? How do you really tell?
Yeah, which is
like you can never really tell if the other team is 100% fired up and everything. No, they have no reason not to be. If they had lost that game, they wouldn't have gone. They'd be out of the playoffs.
Yeah,
right. So it wouldn't make sense for them not to have a great effort night. But they're college kids.
I was sitting there in the press box just looking around. I thought, wow, I thought 1,000 fans was empty. 250 fans, it's really empty.
And to be fair, the Clemson players have been playing in front of fans this year.
That's right. And Tech didn't even have their band and their cheerleaders this go-around. They'd had them the last few games. North end zone was completely empty.
It just felt like a scrimmage, except it didn't even feel like a scrimmage because all those scrimmages you and I used to go to in Lane Stadium back in the day, there was always several thousand people there to show up.
Couple of final thoughts before we transition to talk a little bit about Virginia Tech basketball. Wrapping up, number 3, Clemson's 45-10 win over Virginia Tech. Khalil Herbert, 21 carries, 96 yards, and a touchdown, averaged 4.6 yards a carry. He goes over 1,000 yards on the season, and you think about what he's been able to do in a shortened season, and a season in which he's been injured, to go over the 1,000-yard mark. First 1,000-yard rusher for Virginia Tech since Trayvon McMillan in 2015. What'd you think about what he was able to do in the game, have success running the ball against Clemson's front, and going over 1,000 yards on the season?
He might have moved himself up around.
He looks so good.
Because of the talent of the opposition.
Yeah.
The offensive line, seemed to do a good job considering the talent level of the opposition.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say I felt good about the game. Tech lost by 35, but I picked them to lose by 30. They actually lost by more than I thought they were going to lose.
I picked them to lose by 39, so they lost by a little less.
Right, but I thought they were going to be overwhelmed from the beginning and then hit a couple of junk touchdowns later.
But no,
it was the other way around. They really, really hung in there. And Herbert obviously is a big part of that. I hate it that he's Fuente's first 1,000-yard rusher at Tech, and it comes in a 4-6 season.
Yeah, it's almost like a footnote.
Like none of us. Well, you have, but none of the rest of us have actually gotten to see the guy play in person.
Yeah.
He's only here for a year.
The press box isn't even in person.
Right. Yeah, true. And we're 4-6, so it almost seems like what a waste.
Yeah, what a shame.
Why couldn't we have had that dude in like 2016?
All right, so let's he's about to set a record, all right, at Virginia Tech. And with a program with the rushing history of Virginia Tech dating all the way back to Bill Dooley, what Khalil Herbert has done this year is noteworthy, all right? So the record for yards per carry in a season. It's funny, I was on Rick Watson's show Friday. And so as I'm driving in to be on Rick Watson's show, right before I get out of my truck, Rick says, and Will's going to have a Virginia Tech trivia question for you. And I'm thinking, thanks, Rick.
Am I?
So my go-to question is, who's the single-season record holder for yards per carry average? All right. So we asked that question, and we start getting lots of calls, and people are guessing. And I actually said, it's not Michael Vick. Don't guess Michael Vick. So a couple people called in to guess Michael Vick. Got a Cyrus Lawrence guess, David Wilson guess. And finally a guy called in for the third time. This guy got it right on the third time. He said Andre Kendrick. And you actually can't look this up right now online because the database says Khalil Herbert. And I'll get to that in a second. So if you go to Damian's site, you're going to get told right now that it's Khalil Herbert. So Andre Kendrick, so to qualify for this record at Virginia Tech, you have to have 100 carries in a season. And in 1999, Kendrick had 103 carries in a season for 645 yards, 6.26 yards per carry, and that's the record. David Wilson has the career YPC record for 5.76 or something like that. That's nuts for an entire career. So Kendrick's holding it at 6.26. Khalil Herbert currently has 134 carries, 1,020 yards, 7.61 yards a carry. I did the math, and if he carries the ball 29 times without gaining a single yard, he'll be tied with Andre Kendrick. So going into this UVA game, feed the guy the ball a little bit, he is going to set the record. So that's just phenomenal, and I thought he looked better against Clemson than we've seen him since the injury issues started.
Yeah, had a bye week to rest up and everything. I think that was certainly the case. Hopefully he saves his best for last. I think Andre Kendrick actually led us in yards per carry both of those years, 99 and 2000, right? I think he was number 2 behind Chiron Stith, and then number 2 behind Lee Suggs the next year. But I think he actually led us in yards per carry both years.
So one other little nugget I want to throw in there, and I've said this before, one of the more impressive things about Herbert's year is the very low number of lost yards. Okay, so one of the more impressive performances you will ever see is that Lee Suggs in the 2000 season ran the ball 222 times. I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't write down how many yards he ended up with for the season, but in 222 carries, he only lost 17 yards. Herbert, now by the way, the next time Suggs ran the ball a lot was 2002. He lost about 50 yards. For comparison,
2000 offensive line was much better than the 2002 offensive line.
And so Herbert this year in 134 carries, so that's about 88 fewer carries, has lost 18 yards. It's a really impressive performance. He's just not a guy who loses yardage. And if you even go back, like Ryan Williams was one of the best about taking the 1 yard loss and making it a 2 yard gain, taking the 2 yard gain, making it a 5 yard gain. I think if you look up Ryan Williams, even he lost a lot more yards than that. So that's kind of a hidden stat that's not appreciated. That's really impressive.
All right, we're leaving the football talk on a high note here for the podcast. We'll get back to it for the YouTube live questions, which, gentlemen, we've got a lot of questions coming in right now.
Sure,
so don't worry. Those on YouTube, if you got a question, continue to drop them. We'll get to them in just a moment. We're going to step aside for a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Virginia Tech men's basketball. Big game on Tuesday, coming off a win against VMI. And then at 11:30 in 15 minutes as we record live on Monday, December 7th, Coach Justin Fuente will have his press conference. If there's any newsworthy moments from that press conference, we will bring it up at the end of the show. You're listening and watching to episode 156 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by Campus Emporium and Southeast Regional Training Center. Welcome back into episode 156 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Great to have you with us. Evan Hughes alongside of Chris Coleman, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. We're going to transition from the gridiron to the hardwood. Talk a little Hokie hoops. Virginia Tech picking up another win last Thursday, 64-57 over VMI. It was a close game. A game in which Virginia Tech trailed midway through the second half. Hokies only 4 of 27 from deep, but Chris, they found a way to win the game. What did you take away from the VMI win?
Oh, they couldn't shoot that night, for sure. Mike Young said it after the game. I forget the exact quote, but it was something like, I have no idea how in the world somebody as good as Naheem Ali can get all those open shots and not make any of them.
He was 0 of 7.
Which is pretty much what happened, So, and he's a much better player than that. So that was certainly part of it. I think it's kind of funny that Tech has played their best 2 games against, Villanova and then
South Florida.
What conference is South Florida in?
They're in the American.
Okay. So they're mid-major, and then they played their worst games against low majors, VMI and Radford. Which, by the way, folks listening, people always make the mistakes of calling everybody that's not in a Power 5 conference a mid-major. Well, if everybody else is a mid-major, then what's a low major?
What's a low major?
Exactly. So the
answer VMI.
The answer to that is there's 357 teams in Division I college basketball this year, and your Americans and your Colonials and conferences like that, and your A10s, those are mid-majors. Your low majors are your Big South, your Southern Conference, things like that.
Yeah.
There's probably there's a few schools here and there like Dayton or Xavier, and you could probably consider those schools somewhere between mid-major and Power 5.
I'd consider a lot of teams in the Atlantic 10.
Right. Yeah.
Good conference.
The A10 might be somewhere between like mid-major and Power 5.
Major,
yeah, exactly. So anyway, wanted to go on that quick little rant, but I'll actually worry about how Tech's going to play at home this year. They've played their two best games on the road on neutral site venues, and they're kind of used to playing neutral site venues where there's not a lot of people there, but you're playing a big name team, and it's just kind of fun to go out and do that. But when you're playing somebody at home and you're used to there being a big crowd there, and there's not, and it's just more of a scrimmage atmosphere than anything else. So actually, right now, my biggest worry about this team is playing at home.
So, to build upon that, if you are struggling shooting the basketball, then the support from the home crowd helps you. So I guess a different way to phrase it is, if you clearly I thought they got a lot of open looks the other night, and they just didn't make them. And that gets contagious, and there's no way to break out of it because there's no crowd that's behind you trying to encourage you. It's just you and your guys. And so that'll be something to watch through the rest of the year. And
it could also help them on the road.
Right. So,
so it's all going to even out.
And the funny thing is, we haven't really talked about this for football. I've been pretty unforgiving when it comes to football.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at last year, it's a little alarming that Tech can beat the number 3 Villanova and struggle with VMI. Well, last year they beat number 3 Michigan State and they struggled with VMI. Score the other night was 64-57. Well, last year it was 64-55. So it was just as close last year. And Tech, at the time they played VMI last year, the Hokies were 8-3 and 1-1 in the ACC.
They didn't play them until January.
Yeah, and they struggled with them last year. So that's kind of a if you're alarmed, maybe you should be, maybe you shouldn't be.
It's entirely too early to either be alarmed or 100% excited.
Just kind of let it play.
It's 4 games in. Chill.
4 Hokies were in double figures against VMI. Keve Aluma, double-double, 17 points, 12 rebounds. Tyrese Radford, 13 points, 6 boards. Nearly a double-double for Justin Mutz, 10 points, 9 rebounds. Mutz is somebody I think that could really make an impact down low for Tech this year.
Yeah, and I will say this, with him and Aluma combined in that game, last year, I think Tech shot, they only made like 3 3-pointers that entire game or something like that.
Last year?
No, this year.
Four
this
threes.
year was
4 threes.
4 of 27.
Okay, and what percentage is that? Well, you're good at math.
Oh, let's see. Gosh.
14.8%.
Thank you.
4 of 28 be 14%.
For the record, I did not do that math. I am horrible at math. Thank you, box score.
So, I don't think you win that game. I don't think they would have won any games last year shooting 14% from 3-point range, right?
Yeah, that was their bread and butter last year.
They had to make 3-pointers to win. And this year, when they weren't going down, well, you could get Mutz, you could get Aluma to generate some offense for you on the inside. So, multiple ways to win basketball games this year. That's really my biggest takeaway.
Well, Bisa Bede also poured in 11 points and 4 rebounds for the Hokies. So
listen to this quote. VMI's zone defense had the Hokies confused offensively early in the game. That's actually from last year's recap.
Yeah.
So let's transition quickly. Big game tomorrow on Tuesday. We will talk about that game on Thursday's podcast. But Virginia Tech, ranked 16th in the country, plays host to Penn State. A game a couple of years ago, you'll remember the Hokies were unbeaten, that Sweet 16 team, and lost to Penn State in the ACC Big Ten Challenge.
I will say a couple things. It's like, first of all, I made a mistake on the last podcast. I said Iowa was the only team Tech has ever beaten in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. That's not true. A few years ago, they actually beat Michigan on the road. Tech was down by 15 or 16 points in the first half and then came back and won. So Michigan's the only team besides Iowa that Virginia Tech has beaten. But they've lost to Penn State like 2 or 3 times in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, including that last time. It's like, oh, gosh, I find it really difficult to have kind things to say about Penn State these days. It's like I don't like UVA because I'm a Tech fan, but it's like I don't like Penn State because I'm a human being. You know what I'm saying? It's just, I really want Tech to win this game. I'll be very, very disappointed if they lose it. I'll put that. I say that without not knowing much about Penn State. I know Penn State beat VMI by about 20. And then they had one other really close game. What did they do last night? I know they played Seton Hall.
Well, I do want to point out VMI was leading at the half against Penn State, and then they lost 86. I'm sorry, they beat them 86-65, 21-point win. They beat VCU on a buzzer beater, 72-69, and then last night in overtime they lost 98-92 to Seton Hall.
Overtime. So they played an overtime game against Seton Hall 2 days before playing Virginia Tech.
But they're going to be fired up potentially after losing a game. So
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I feel like Tech. This is the game Tech should win. And I know nothing about Penn State except for their record and the scores of their games. But this is one I feel like if both teams played their A game, Virginia Tech should win this one. So go win it.
So let's talk about the ACC Big Ten Challenge overall. Wow, and it gets into a larger point I want to discuss. The ACC Big Ten Challenge started in 1999, and the ACC won the first 10 of them, 1999 through 2008. So the ACC at one point was 10-0. It's now 12-6-3, which means in the last 11, the ACC has outright won 2 of them. They've lost 6 of them and tied 3 of them after starting out 10-0. Now, what happened circa 2008-2009?
TV contracts?
The Big Ten Network.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what you're seeing is, the ACC has always been historically the best basketball conference. The money has started to make the Big Ten better and better, and the SEC also. Look at the number of good coaches in the SEC now.
Yeah.
Buzz Williams, now Buzz is a unique case, but Buzz Williams left the ACC for the SEC. Is Bruce Pearl still coaching?
He is. Got Auburn to a Final Four 2 years ago.
Yeah, and to probation since then.
With the money, the Big Ten and the SEC are making a run at the ACC's historical top dog stature. So that is a stark change from 10-0 to 2-6-3 in the last 11.
Cassie Larimore chimes in the chat and goes, "I'm not sure why, but I get Terrell Bell vibes from Mutz."
Terrell Bell vibes? Bell was generally more of a 3 than a 4. But I understand, like, he's never, like, I don't think Mutz will ever be like a star player or anything like that. And neither was Terrell Bell, but he was a guy that could make some open shots for you, was a good rebounder, good defender.
Yeah. A glue guy. In looking at Pimsel and Aluma and Mutz, to me, Mutz is the one guy who can start from the perimeter and drive to the middle. I think he showed that against VMI. I remember a drive from the wing down into the paint.
Yeah, he's those other guys are 6'9"-ish, 6'10", something like that. He's 6'7".
Yeah.
So we'll transition now to our favorite part of the podcast. Those are where we get to take the questions from you chiming in on YouTube. I'll also be monitoring Twitter as Coach Justin Fuente will soon speak with the media. If there's any news, I will be sure to fill those in, listening and watching here on the Tech Sideline Podcast. Let's go ahead and dive right into the chats. Again, a lot of people commenting right now. Let's start with, let's go to, I had a Twitter question from JPC-VT. He asks, Virginia Tech has now lost 4 straight games, the second time in Justin Fuente's 5 years that it has happened. Saturday night's score tied 2019 Duke as the worst ever loss against an ACC team. This will be the first losing regular season since the early 1990s. Saturday, when asked about support from the administration, Fuente said, "I feel great about what we're doing and where we're going. I feel that Fuente struggles to acknowledge how frustrated the fan base is with him and the state of the program. What do you all make of his comment?"
He has, when he makes public comments, he has many groups he's addressing. He's addressing his administration, he's addressing his players, he's addressing the media, and he's addressing his fans. And you cannot give an answer that will satisfy all four groups.
That's right.
Knowing the way he thinks, he's going to answer the question for his players. That is his first priority. Maybe the admin, I don't know, but he's got to be careful about what he says publicly in front of his players, and I think that's what it's about. And I also think he's not making that stuff up. I think that there are changes coming to the program after the Baylor dalliance. He and Whit got together and talked about what direction to take the program in. And I remember when I interviewed Whit, and he's probably said this other places, Justin wants to make this the best player development program in the country. So they've gotten into the specifics of not just facilities and support, but what is going to be the focus of the program. So Fuente feels like he has all of that set and locked down, and they're getting ready to start making progress in those areas. The question is
5 years into his tenure, right?
Is it too late? And from the fan standpoint, it certainly appears to be too late.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that. So yeah, I don't think too much. I don't pay much attention to coaches' comments after a game because of all that. They're addressing so many different people. They really haven't had a chance to sit back and process everything. It's 10 minutes after the game.
Well, I try not to, except I went after him for what he said about the end of the half.
It depends on. It kind of depends on. Sometimes they say things because something that's controversial, maybe. I don't know, but he never does anything like that. So I've always, studying his entire tenure as a guy who reads all of writes all of TSL's articles. If you want the real Justin Fuente, read the Tech Talk Live notes.
Yes. Which are free, by the way, folks.
Yes.
And Jake Lyman does an excellent job of transcribing those.
He has them transcribed before the show's over.
That's
an exaggeration, but it's very quick.
Yeah.
Update from Justin Fuente's press conference that is taking place on Monday morning at 11:30. This is a tweet from Norm Wood. Fuente on if he has a health update on Hokies quarterback Hendon Hooker. Not a lot, other than he was obviously having some issues with his temperature. He was fine Sunday. And Matej Cease also chimed in and said fine after the game. So that's the update from Justin Fuente on Monday regarding Hendon Hooker's health, which we discussed earlier in the show.
I just think his core temperature got too low. And again, I'd have to go back and see what he was wearing on the sideline.
He had a I don't have the term for it, the thing that is open on your face but goes over your head and down your neck.
Right.
It wasn't like he was out there, completely unprepared.
Oh, sure.
But still.
Yeah.
Question from Joseph Warren. Does the hiring of Shane Beamer at USC, lowercase e, which I assume means USC East. I like that. Does the hiring of Shane Beamer at USC a statement about their program or Shane's readiness to be a head coach?
When we're talking about South Carolina, is it a statement about their program?
I think means more the position that they're in, where they are in the state of a program.
I think they're a unique program in that they're a big program.
Well-funded
with good facilities and a great recruiting
fans.
area, but at absolute best, the third best team in their division.
Yeah.
Because unless Florida or Georgia just screw up, South Carolina's never going to be able to pass them. So if you're an established head coach, why would you want to move there?
Yeah, you're not really going to want to go there.
Yeah.
Spurrier did it on the downside of his career,
but
I think he kind of did it for fun.
He did. Absolutely.
You ever hear the details about that the Under Armour contract they had? I'd have to go back and look it up, but Under Armour was paying South Carolina like $5 million a year, a lot of money, and like almost all of that was going to Spurrier.
Yeah.
Even after he retired, they were paying him tons of money.
God. But it could be an attractive guy or attractive job for a guy like Shane. And because if Shane puts together a few 8-4 seasons there, then
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. That means his career's going here.
Yeah.
Right? And that means...
Now, for those just listening, Chris doesn't mean here in Blacksburg. He was holding his hand and trending up.
Right, yes. Sorry. I'm telling you, man, TSL TV. Not the TV, yeah.
Only do this on television.
Yeah, exactly. So now, but it could trend here.
Sure.
One day. It would certainly be less riskier to hire him 5 years from now after we know whether or not he's done a good job at South Carolina. Right?
Yeah.
And he is a risky hire for them. It's he's never been a head coach before. It's a high risk, high reward, to be honest with you.
Not many hires are going to check all the boxes, but he checks a lot of them.
None of them are going to check all the boxes.
He is well liked there. He's popular with former players. A lot of people went to bat for him.
Right.
And South Carolina wants to give him a shot. He could be a program builder. He could be the guy.
And I'm pretty sure they got him for cheap. So
yeah, I haven't had a chance to read articles.
So if it doesn't work out, like it's not going to be like a huge expensive buyout or something like that. And I'm actually glad it worked out this way long term because, or it's not like he's at Georgia, a place where he would be impossible to pry him away from. If he does well at South Carolina and 4 or 5 years from now, Virginia Tech is in the market again or whenever, it's easier to pry him away from South Carolina if you want to go that route.
Right.
My biggest concern about Shane at Virginia Tech would be if it didn't work out and you had to fire a Beamer. And boy, if you think things are toxic right now, that would be a mess. So, but if he goes there, the good thing about him at South Carolina, we'll know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes and no. So I've started in watching the way things are trending with Fuente and thinking about making another hire. I've wondered what kind of guys can Virginia Tech get. There's always the rising coaches from the G5 type programs, guys like Fuente, and the latest names are Chadwell at Coastal Carolina, Healy at Charlotte. Guys in anybody who's coming up through like Cincinnati or a place like that. But I also wonder if former head coaches at other places would be another path that Virginia Tech could take. And specifically, you think about a guy like Tom Herman down at Texas. Herman was very successful at Houston. He's at Texas.
With somebody else's players at Houston.
Well, but he was doing a good job recruiting the Houston area also
right.
Before he left. So I just wonder, before Witt left Cincinnati, he went the Tommy Tuberville route. I wasn't thrilled with that. I think Butch Jones left Cincinnati to go to Tennessee, and they hired Tommy Tuberville. I don't know that there are certain retreads I'd be willing to try and retreads I wouldn't be willing to try.
I understand why Witt did that for Cincinnati. At that point, Cincinnati was losing their head coach every 3 years.
Yeah.
Because somebody bigger was hiring them away. Yeah. And he wanted something in there that could possibly lead to some stability, I think. It depends on the retread. Like, I thought it was a horrible idea for South Carolina to hire Will Muschamp. Because he'd already failed at a bigger program in the same division.
Right.
So what are the chances that was actually going to work out at South Carolina? That was horrible. So and that was the same AD who hired Shane. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out there. I've got I don't know, man. I was thinking about this some yesterday, and I actually don't know that the Virginia Tech fan base will ever truly be happy again. They had Frank Beamer, a Virginia Tech graduate, winning 10 games every year. They'll never be that happy again.
Well, so the parallel I would draw is Alabama. Alabama had Bear Bryant, and then they did win another national championship with a coach whose name I suddenly can't remember. 1992.
Yeah, I know who.
So it's actually a trivia question to go on a little bit of a sidetrack. Trivia question during the Tech game the other night. The last time Virginia Tech didn't go to a bowl, who won the national championship and who won the Heisman? And it was Alabama that won the national championship in '92, and Gino Toretta won the Heisman. I just remember now we're answering questions, so I got to wrap this up. But Alabama was probably in an area where they weren't really happy, and then they hired their Nick Saban, a guy who was as successful as Bear Bryant. So for the Virginia Tech fan base to be happy, you're going to have to hire a guy who will be air quotes, as successful as Frank Beamer.
Right.
And that's...
Is that likely? Which is why I'm saying... And it's not just as successful, it's just as successful in the way Frank Beamer. Like, Tech fans, they want something very specific here. Like, let's be quite honest here. I don't mean this out of any disrespect at all. But would Tech fans be all over Shane Beamer being Virginia Tech's coach if his last name wasn't Beamer? No. No chance.
Not really, no.
No, exactly. No. So there's something very specific that Virginia Tech fans want. You see that they all want former players to coach here. They want Beamers to coach here. They want to win in such a specific way. And that's why I don't think they'll ever be happy again.
You have to prove it to them that it can be done another way.
Right.
So
right.
I think we're losing Evan here. Are you?
Sorry. No, I'm good.
You're okay over there?
Here's a good question from David Lanham. Do you believe Foo's future depends on the UVA game?
No.
I don't think so.
Nope.
I don't think any coach's future ever depends on one game. Maybe in some very drastic situations. Like, I'm sure they would fire an Auburn or an Alabama coach based on one game. That certainly can happen down there. No, not here. Fuente's future is going to be determined by. Well, first of all, Witt has to be dedicated to make the move. Even if he is dedicated to make the move, first of all, he would have to secure the buyout money. And then second of all, it would have to be approved by the Board of Visitors.
Yeah, he'd have to go through the administration.
I think he could secure the buyout money. The last we heard is the BOV would be very, very concerned about optics in a year where, you'd be paying a $10 million buyout while also laying off a bunch of athletic department employees and things like that. Yeah. The public perception of that, the optics would not be good. Even though the buyout money would be coming from a separate pool. Your average person doesn't understand that.
Right.
So the optics would be really bad. Now, here's the difference between Virginia Tech administration and SEC administration. South Carolina just fired their coach. They don't care what people think. They don't. I mean, because
today they're in a happy place.
Will Muschamp was bad for their football program, so they fired him, and they don't care what anybody
the school
thinks.
President was heavily involved in that,
right?
And you won't get that at Virginia Tech.
No.
And that's not a criticism of Tim Sands.
Right.
That's just not the way it works.
It's just a different culture, right?
Let's do one more question from Billy Parvin. Any chance Bud Foster would come out of retirement to join Shane in South Carolina?
No.
I actually heard that from someone over the weekend, and Bud Foster told him directly, no way I'm going to do that. Yeah. No, what will likely happen is Shane will make a run at Torian Gray.
To be his DC?
To be his defensive coordinator.
And he's still at Florida, correct?
He's the defensive backs coach or cornerbacks coach at Florida. So if he wouldn't make that move is just a defensive backs coach, that would be a step down. But a promotion to DC would be a step up for him. So I think that's the direction Shane will try to go in for his defensive coordinator. It's not going to be Bud Foster.
No, Bud's retired and wants to be retired.
Bud wants to be retired, and Bud was not. Look, Shane is going to put emphasis on recruiting at South Carolina, and he's going to hire a staff. A staff of people who were 100% dedicated to recruiting, and that was never Bud at Virginia Tech. Bud was a great football coach, but there's a reason right now why we're starting a 265-pound defensive tackle and a 280-pound defensive tackle, right? Because we just weren't all that interested in recruiting towards the end.
But what about Dax Hollifield? Bud, just for whatever reason, Bud liked Dax and sold out to recruit Dax, but that wasn't his typical MO.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, great questions, and I apologize for coughing. Ever had a tickle in your throat that you just can't scratch and you just got to go get some water? That's what I need to do right now.
So you got any more questions?
So, what's that?
Any more questions? Like one more?
Let's do one more. Absolutely. One more. I want to go back to a basketball question real quick. Let me go to, it's a long chat. Where was it? And this was a question we had last week, but Matt Hart wanted to clarify. Clarification from my question last week. Should have worded it differently. How attractive is Mike Young's system to high-level recruits? Not necessarily if Mike Young would chase them, but how attractive is his system?
Oh, I think that's actually a really good question. Probably above my head to a certain extent. I don't think the system. My gut feel is that it's not either a net positive or a net negative. I think it's a system that can succeed if you don't necessarily get top 40 players, but Joe Bamisile was a highly recruited player, right? I think it's more attractive than like Tony Bennett's system. Offensively?
It's a more offensively oriented system.
Right.
Because UVA is predicated on defense.
Yeah, they run the pack line defense, but offensively, it's just unless UVA had like NBA talent, they're kind of a grind to watch. They can still be very, very efficient and things like that, but they can be a grind to watch offensively if they don't have like a couple of NBA guys.
To me, it's a sales job by Mike Young, and you take a look at a guy like Joe Bamisile, who's very talented, but isn't ready to play in the system.
Right.
You could tell Joe's not ready to
He's
play
not
in the
quite
system.
ready to play.
So it would help if Young can get him integrated into the system, and then he starts having a lot of success, and then you can use that as a case in point. But you have to sell the highly rated recruit on, we're not going to plug you in right away and have you dropping 20 a game. It's going to take a year or two.
Who was the guy that, he declared for the draft out of UVA, was a first-round pick a couple years ago?
DeAndre Hunter?
Yeah. Well, he redshirted at UVA.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's something.
Is that the first reference of redshirt
Yeah,
on the
I
podcast
believe
today?
so.
But I don't know if that was because of injury or whatever. I don't know. But I do know he redshirted at UVA. And I know that Tech will have an opportunity to redshirt guys next year. Like, I don't know who else they're going to sign in this class, but the Hokies are going to have a lot of players coming back next season. And, if you recruit maybe a couple guys who don't have to be highly recruited, but if you feel like they have a high ceiling, and you'll have the opportunity to redshirt those guys next year. And I think that'd be good for the long-term health of the program. I don't sit here and think every basketball player should redshirt like football players. That's certainly not the case. But when you have an opportunity to do so, I sometimes think, it might be more beneficial if Virginia Tech could sign a 4-star guy or a 3-star guy this spring. Maybe right now, the better option for the program would be to sign the 3-star guy who's willing to redshirt, because they're going to have that opportunity next year. That 4-star guy, he might not want a redshirt, and then when he comes in and he's not getting as much playing time, and then boom, he's out.
Yeah.
He's gone, hits the portal, right?
Yep. So a couple other news items. Fuente says Brock Hoffman will get an opportunity to get back in there at center. It's not like he's super in the doghouse. Burmeister practiced Sunday, and Fuente thinks he'll be fine for Saturday. It was a leg injury. We heard possible concussion, but no, that's not what Fuente is saying publicly. He's saying it was a leg injury after he was sacked. An interesting quote. Andy Bitter. I don't know that Andy Bitter asked this question, but Fuente was asked back in September, Did you think Virginia Tech would play all 11 scheduled games? And Fuente said never. Did not think that would happen. And they did. Yeah, some interesting stuff.
One more piece of information out as well. Justin Fuente on Christian Darasol's health. He said, I anticipate it would take a lot for him to miss this game.
Yeah.
Which is good to hear.
He said after the game, he said, I think he calls him CD. He said, I asked CD if he was okay, and he said, yeah, coach, I'm okay, but he always says that.
Right.
So Christian Darrisaw is your guy, man. He wants to play no matter what.
Yeah, and he's nowhere close to being 100% either. I know it was just preliminary grades, and I know it was Clemson, but he's played some darn good players throughout the course of his career, and he always beats all of them, and he didn't grade out well against Clemson.
Interesting.
He's nowhere close to 100%.
Yep. It's amazing how an hour and a half goes by and snap a finger. A little bit short, actually, but football, basketball, it's crossover season. Lots of great stuff going on. It's UVA week. And plus, as you heard Chris talk about earlier, he really wants to beat Penn State. And that's coming up on Thursday's podcast as well.
Yeah.
UVA preview and recapping Tech Penn State.
And we've also got the furniture for the new office is being delivered. It's all here and pretty much set up. So we got that going on, which is good. And there's something else. Oh, so Campus Emporium, I think we put the ad up during the break. They've got free shipping on orders over $12 through December 13th. So visit campusemporium.com or one of their 2 stores.
Chris Coleman, it's my favorite question to ask every show. What's coming up on TSL this week?
Well, we're going to have a typical week. We'll have Inside the Numbers.
I will have an article today. I didn't write one last week.
We'll have an article today. I'm just going to be a normal week, man. Q&A.
Brandon Patterson?
Maybe not. I think Brandon wants to take some time off during the holidays.
Yes.
It's all.
It really builds at this time of year.
When you're stuck at home during COVID with a wife and kids, and you can never get out of the house, man, I can't imagine what that would be like. Not that I'm sure it's great for some people, but at the same time, you need to take a break, right?
I'm going to invite him to go streaking on the quad. That's an old school reference for those of you that don't know the movie.
I have seen Old School, for those that are about to ask. I have seen Old School.
But,
good. Normal week.
But yeah, mostly normal week, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, as a reminder, be sure to follow Will and Chris on Twitter at Chris Coleman TSL, at Will Stewart TSL, at Tech Sideline on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the like and subscribe.
Also, Instagram, where Nick Brown is running our Instagram.
He's working
account.
really hard on that Instagram. That's a great point. Plug the Instagram. He does our Instagram stories, updates on men's basketball, women's basketball, and football. I mean, up to date, great content. Good work, Nick Brown.
Yep.
So, all right. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen?
None whatsoever. Let's rock and roll.
Thanks to everybody for the fantastic questions in the chat today. If you didn't get yours asked, be sure to bring it back on Thursday. Hokies and Cavaliers, Commonwealth Cup on the line. We preview it on Thursday. Hope you can join us at 1 o'clock. That'll do it for us, for our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. I'm Evan Hughes, your podcast host, saying so long. Thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 156 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.